So I spent 2 days coaching master's level strength coaches with some of the best performance coaches in the world. And the biggest lessons I came away with had nothing to do with sets and reps. And that might sound strange because we covered a lot of ground. We were talking about athlete profiling, plyometric progressions, force velocity profiling, all of it. The content was excellent, but the real value, it didn't come from the presentations. It came from the conversations, from watching other coaches work, from a few specific moments that reinforced something that I've believed for a long time and couldn't stop thinking about. So let me give you some context because I think it matters. Altus is one of those environments where the standard is just different. The coaches there aren't guessing, right? They're not winging it. There's a level of an intentionality in how they work. So how they observe, how they communicate, how they structure their thinking that you just don't see everywhere. And when you put a group of ambitious, educated coaches into that environment for 2 days, something interesting happens. And you start to notice the gap. And I don't mean the gap between what they know and what Altus coaches know. Most of the MSc students are highly educated, right? They've done the reading and they understand the science. The gap I'm talking about is different. It's the gap between knowing something and being able to apply it consistently under pressure in real time. And here's the important part. That's not a knowledge gap. That's a systems gap. And there are 3 lessons I want to share with you that all point directly at it. The first lesson comes from Rich Clark, and it's one of those ideas that sounds simple until you actually think about what it means for how you train athletes. Rich made a distinction between perception and reaction. And I want to make sure this lands because most coaches are training one when they think they're training the other. Here's how most reactive training looks in practice. You set up a light, the athlete waits, the light fires, the athlete moves, or you blow a whistle and the athlete sprints, or you call a cue and the athlete responds. That's reaction, stimulus then output, and it's fine and it has its place. But here's the problem. That is not what sport actually looks like. In sport, athletes aren't responding to a beep. They're reading information in real time, so a defender's positioning, the drop of a shoulder or the angle of a teammate's run, the timing of a ball, right? They're making decisions based on what they see and not just necessarily what they hear. Think about a basketball player driving to the basket. They're not reacting to a light. They're reading the defender's hips, they're processing depth and angle and speed, all of it simultaneously, and making a decision before they've consciously thought about it. That's perception, and it's a completely different cognitive and physical demand. So here's the reframe, and this is what I want you to sit with. If your training environment doesn't include other people, so it doesn't include unpredictability, it doesn't require athletes to read and respond to what's actually happening in front of them, then you're not training perception. You're training reaction to a preset trigger, and there's a ceiling on how transferable that is to sport. The second lesson came from a conversation with Dan Paff, and it's one that I think about a lot. We were talking about the coaching eye, specifically how to develop the ability to actually see what's happening when an athlete moves. And he shared a method his mentor taught him that I think is one of the most practical things I've heard in a long time. Watch one body part for the entire set, one part from start to finish, and then switch. Watch the opposite side for the next set, and then watch how they interact. Over time, so over weeks and months of doing this deliberately, you build a complete picture. So not a snapshot and not an impression, but an actual detailed understanding of how that athlete moves. And here's the important part. Most coaches try to watch everything at once. They're scanning from foot to head and back again. They're trying to take it all in. They're trying to catch every fault, every compensation, every inefficiency. But because they're trying to watch everything, they're actually seeing nothing. At least not clearly and not usefully, right? Because the eye needs direction, and it needs direction to be deliberate. So in practice, this is what it looks like. If you're watching a jump, you're going to start with the foot. How does it contact the ground? Is there adequate stiffness? Is there a collapse? And watch that for the whole set. Next set, move to the ankle. Next set to the knee. Next set to the hip. And then how the knee and the hip interact under load. So you build your coaching eye systematically, brick by brick. And there's a reason this matters beyond the observation skill itself. It's the same principle that runs through everything that I teach about coaching. You cannot process everything at once. You need structure. You need a sequence. You have to have already decided where your attention is going before the athlete starts moving, so you're not scrambling to figure it out in real time. That's not just an observation skill, that's a systems skill, and it transfers to every part of how you coach. The third lesson is the simplest one, and in my experience, it's also the hardest one to actually do. Stay in your lane. And here's what I mean. In high performance environments, the best setups are not built around one expert who does everything. They're built around aligned experts, so people who genuinely care and are excellent in their specific domain, who communicate well with each other, and who trust each other enough to hand off something when the problem isn't theirs. But most coaches, and especially the good ones, again, those that care and who have been in the industry for a long time, have a tendency to try to do everything. The movement issue, the rehab piece, the nutritional question that the athlete just threw at them, the psychological stuff that's clearly affecting performance but sits well outside the scope of a strength session. And I get it. It comes from a good place. You want to help and you want to be useful. You don't want to turn an athlete away with a "that's not my area." But here's what actually happens when everyone tries to do everything. The athlete gets less. Not because the coach isn't smart, but because doing everything means doing nothing particularly well. And it creates confusion for the athlete. So mixed messages, overlapping advice, no one clearly accountable for a single outcome. The best environments I've ever seen operate differently. Everyone knows their role and everyone stays within it. And because of that, the athlete gets the full benefit of each expert's depth, not the diluted version of 5 people trying to cover the whole map. That's not a limitation. That's a system working properly. So here's what I keep coming back to. These 3 lessons look different on the surface, right? One is about how we design training environments. One is about observational skills. One is about professional roles and scopes of practice, but they're all pointing at the same thing. You need a system to work within. The coaches at Altus aren't better because they know more. They're better because they've built structure around what they know. They've thought carefully about where their attention goes and why. They've decided in advance how they're going to operate, so they're not figuring it out under pressure in real time. And that structure is what lets them do the work at a high level consistently without it costing them more than it should. And that's the shift. Not from less knowledge to more knowledge, but from scattered to organized, usable knowledge. From technician to architect. Here's the bottom line. The coaches who improve the fastest, right? The ones who build real expertise and are able to apply it under pressure aren't always the ones who've consumed the most content. They're the ones who've organized what they know into something that actually use when it matters. And Altus reminded me of that. And I think it's the most important thing I can keep saying to coaches who are trying to level up their practice. If this is something that you want to go deeper on, the system side of coaching, right? So connecting the dots, how to structure your decision making, how to build frameworks and systems that actually hold up in the real world, hit that subscribe button because that's what this is all about.